The day Grace walked down the aisle to marry the village madman, her own mother turned away in shame, but what happened next would shock everyone who laughed at her. Wait, before we dive into this story that will leave you speechless, let me ask you something. Have you ever been forced to make a choice that everyone thought was crazy? Well, Grace's story will make you question everything you think you know about love, family, and what it means to be truly blessed. Trust me, you need to hear this until the very end because what happens will blow your mind. Grace stood at the church door, her white dress feeling like a prison. The whole town had come to watch what they called the joke wedding of the century. Some came to laugh. Others came to pity her. But nobody came to celebrate. You don't have to do this, her best friend Mary whispered, grabbing her arm. We can run. Right now. I have money saved up. Grace looked at Mary's kind eyes and felt her heart break a little more. You know I can't. My father owes them too much money. If I don't marry Daniel today, they will throw my whole family on the street. Daniel. The man everyone called crazy. The man who talked to himself in the market. The man who wore the same torn shirt every day and had wild hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in years. Grace's father had borrowed money from Daniel's rich uncle to pay for her sick mother's hospital bills. When he couldn't pay it back, the uncle made a deal. My nephew needs a wife, he had said with a cruel smile. Your daughter is pretty enough. She marries him, and your debt is gone. Now here she was, 22 years old, about to marry a man she barely knew. A man everyone said was not right in the head. The church doors opened. Grace saw Daniel standing at the altar. His hair was still messy. His suit looked too big for his thin body. But something was different. He wasn't talking to himself today. He was standing very still, very quiet, watching her with eyes that seemed gentle. As Grace walked down the aisle, she heard the whispers. Poor girl. What a waste of beauty. Her life is over. I heard he screams at night. They say he sees things that aren't there. Grace's mother sat in the front row, crying behind her hands. Her father couldn't even look at her. Her 3 younger brothers stared at the floor. The shame was eating their family alive. But as Grace got closer to Daniel, something strange happened. He smiled at her. Not a crazy smile. Not a scary smile. A soft, sad smile that seemed to say, I'm sorry this is happening to you too. The priest began the ceremony. Grace's hands shook as she held Daniel's. His hands were clean, she noticed. Soft. Not the hands of a madman. Do you, Grace, take Daniel to be your husband? Grace opened her mouth. The whole church held its breath. She could still run. She could say no and face whatever came after. She looked at Daniel one more time. His eyes were clear. So clear. And in them, she saw something that shocked her. Understanding. I do, she whispered. Daniel's uncle smiled like a cat that had caught a mouse. The crowd murmured. Some people actually laughed out loud. When it was Daniel's turn, he spoke clearly and firmly. I do. His voice was strong. Not the voice of someone who wasn't right in the head. They were pronounced husband and wife. Daniel lifted Grace's veil gently, like she was made of glass. He kissed her cheek so softly she barely felt it. Thank you, he whispered in her ear. I promise I will take care of you. The words sent chills down Grace's spine. There was something about the way he said them. Like he meant every word. After the ceremony, people threw rice and made jokes. Hope you don't mind sharing the bed with his imaginary friends, someone shouted. Everyone laughed except Grace's family and Daniel. Daniel's uncle walked up to them. Boy, you better treat her right. She's too good for you, but she's yours now. He handed Daniel a small bag. Your new house is ready. Don't mess this up. Grace's father shook Daniel's hand without looking at him. Take care of my daughter, he said quietly. I will, Daniel replied. Better than you did. Grace gasped. Did Daniel just talk back to her father? Everyone stared in shock. Daniel had never spoken up to anyone before. Daniel's uncle frowned. Watch your mouth, boy. But Daniel wasn't looking at his uncle. He was looking at Grace's father with steady eyes. A real father would never sell his daughter to pay his debts. The whole crowd went silent. This wasn't the Daniel they knew. The Daniel they knew never spoke up, never defended anyone, never seemed to understand what was happening around him. Grace's father's face turned red with anger and shame. How dare you? Come, Grace, Daniel said gently, taking her hand. Let's go home. As they walked away from the church, Grace's mind was spinning. Who was this man she had just married? The whole town thought he was crazy, but everything about him seemed normal, calm, even wise. They walked through the busy streets of Lagos. Cars honked. Street vendors called out their goods. Children played football in the road. Normal city life continued while Grace's world had completely changed. Are you hungry? Daniel asked as they passed a food vendor. A little, Grace admitted. Daniel bought rice and chicken for both of them. He paid with crisp, clean money from a neat wallet. Grace stared. Mad people didn't carry neat wallets with clean money. They ate in silence on a bench under a big tree. Grace watched Daniel carefully. He ate slowly, politely. He said thank you to the vendor. He helped an old woman carry her bags when she walked by. None of this was the behavior of a crazy person. Daniel, Grace said finally, can I ask you something? Of course. You're my wife now. You can ask me anything. Are you really? I mean, people say you're crazy. Daniel smiled. Mad? Not right in the head. Grace nodded, feeling embarrassed. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Grace, can you keep a secret? Yes. I'm not crazy. I never was. Grace nearly choked on her rice. What? I've been pretending to be mad for 3 years. Ever since my parents died and left me with my uncle. Grace stared at him with wide eyes. But why? Daniel's face grew dark. Because my uncle is a very bad man. He killed my parents for their money. I saw him do it, but I was only 17. Too young to stop him. Too scared to tell the police because he has friends everywhere. Grace's heart started beating fast. So you pretended to be crazy? It was the only way to protect myself. If everyone thought I was mad, my uncle wouldn't see me as a threat. He could control my parents' money and property, and I would be safe because crazy people can't testify in court. Can't inherit property. Can't be believed if they accuse someone of murder. Grace felt like the ground was moving under her feet. But Daniel, if you're not crazy, why did you marry me? You could have said no. Daniel looked at her with those clear, gentle eyes. Because, Grace, you needed saving just as much as I did. And because... He paused. Because I've been watching you for months. I know you volunteer at the children's hospital. I know you give your lunch money to the old beggar woman near your house. I know you're kind and good, and you deserve so much better than being sold off to pay your father's debts. Grace felt tears start to fall. You've been watching me? Not in a scary way, Daniel said quickly. I work at the phone repair shop across from the hospital. I see you there every Tuesday and Thursday. You always smile at the sick children. You always have time to help people who need it. I thought maybe we could help each other. Grace just discovered her crazy husband Daniel has been pretending to be mad for 3 years, but the real reason why will shock you even more than you think. Grace wiped her tears and looked at Daniel with new eyes. So everything, the talking to yourself, the messy hair, wearing the same clothes. All an act, Daniel said. I had to make it believable. My uncle had to think I was completely harmless. But Daniel, if you've been planning this for 3 years, what happens now? What's your real plan? Daniel smiled, and for the first time, Grace saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Now, my dear wife, we're going to make my uncle pay for what he did. And we're going to get justice for both our families. Grace felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? My uncle thinks he's so smart. He forced you to marry me because he wants to control you too. He knows your father owes money to other people as well. He plans to use you to collect debts from your father forever. Make you his servant, basically. Grace's mouth fell open. How do you know this? Because I've been listening to his phone calls for months. I may act crazy, but crazy people are invisible. People talk around them like they're not there. I know all his secrets, Grace. All of them. Daniel pulled out a small recording device from his pocket. I've been recording everything. His confessions about killing my parents. His plans to cheat other families. His illegal money-lending business. Everything. Grace stared at the device. Daniel, this could put him in prison forever. That's the plan. But I needed a witness. Someone people would believe. Someone clean and good that the police would trust. Daniel looked at her meaningfully. I needed a wife. The truth hit Grace like a thunderbolt. You didn't just marry me to save me. You married me because you needed me for your plan. Daniel's face fell. Grace, yes, at first that was part of it. But I swear to you, the more I watched you, the more I realized you deserved to be saved for your own sake. You're nothing like your greedy father. You're good. Pure. Kind. Grace stood up from the bench, her mind spinning. So I went from being sold by my father to being used by my husband. Is this my life now? Being used by men? No. Daniel stood up too, grabbing her hands gently. Grace, listen to me. Yes, I had a plan. Yes, I needed help. But I also chose you because I believe you're strong enough to handle the truth. Smart enough to help me. And... He paused. And because I was already falling in love with who you are. Grace pulled her hands away. Love? Daniel, you don't even know me. I know you stay late at the hospital to read stories to children who don't have visitors. I know you give your own food to hungry people on the street. I know you work 2 jobs to help pay for your mother's medicine, even though your father gambles away most of the money. I know you dream of becoming a nurse, but you gave up school to help your family. Daniel's eyes were intense. I know you, Grace. The real you. And you're beautiful inside and out. Grace felt tears starting again. Everything he said was true. How had he seen so much when everyone else in her life saw so little? What happens now? She whispered. Now we go to our new house. We start our new life. And tomorrow, we go to the police together and bring down my uncle once and for all. Daniel's house was nothing like Grace expected. It was small but clean. Very clean. The furniture was simple but nice. Books were everywhere. The kitchen had fresh food. Everything was organized and peaceful. You live like this, but people think you're crazy? Grace asked, amazed. My uncle only visits once a month to check on me. I have a whole day to mess everything up and make it look like a crazy person lives here. The rest of the time, I live normally. Daniel showed Grace to the bedroom. There were 2 beds. I know this marriage wasn't your choice, he said quietly. You don't have to share a bed with me until, if you ever want to. I respect you too much to force anything. Grace looked at this man who everyone called mad. This man who had been protecting himself with the smartest plan she'd ever heard. This man who was gentle and respectful and saw her for who she really was. Daniel, she said, tell me about your parents. Daniel's face grew sad. They were good people. They owned 3 houses and a small business. They helped people in the community. My father was going to send me to university. His voice cracked. My uncle was jealous. He wanted their money. One night, he came to dinner. He put poison in their food. I was studying in my room. When I came down, they were both dead. Oh, Daniel. Grace's heart broke for him. I saw him cleaning up. I heard him on the phone telling someone it was done. I was so scared, I hid until he left. Then I called the police, but when they came, my uncle was back. He told them my parents died of food poisoning. He had fake documents showing he was the heir to everything. He said I was traumatized and not thinking clearly. And that's when you started acting crazy? I realized that night that he would kill me too if he thought I was a threat. So I became someone who could never be a threat. Someone people would never believe. It saved my life, but it cost me everything else. Grace reached out and touched Daniel's face gently. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Daniel closed his eyes and leaned into her touch. Grace, I promise you. After we finish this, after we get justice, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret marrying me. I will love you and protect you and make you happy. If you'll let me. That night, Grace lay in her bed thinking about everything. In one day, her entire life had changed. She had married a man everyone thought was crazy. She had discovered he was actually brilliant. She had learned she was part of a plan for justice. And most shocking of all, she was starting to feel something she never expected. She was starting to feel hope. The next morning, Daniel woke up and found Grace making breakfast. She had braided her hair neatly and was humming softly. Good morning, husband, she said with a small smile. Good morning, wife, Daniel replied, and Grace felt butterflies in her stomach at the word. Are you ready to go to the police? Grace asked. Are you sure you want to do this with me? Once we start, there's no going back. My uncle is dangerous. Grace thought about her father selling her to pay his debts. She thought about Daniel losing his parents and pretending to be crazy for 3 years. She thought about all the other families Daniel's uncle had probably hurt. I'm sure, she said firmly. Let's go get justice. At the police station, Daniel played the recordings. Grace told them about the forced marriage and the debt schemes. The police were amazed. They had been trying to catch Daniel's uncle for years, but could never prove anything. This is enough evidence to put him away for life, the chief of police said. But we need to arrest him carefully. He has connections everywhere. 3 days later, the news spread through the whole city. Daniel's uncle was arrested for murder, fraud, and extortion. The newspapers called it the biggest crime bust of the year. But the biggest shock came when people realized who had brought him down. Daniel, the man they all called crazy. The same people who had laughed at Grace's wedding were now calling Daniel a hero. The same people who had pitied Grace were now saying she was the luckiest woman alive. Grace's father came to their house with tears in his eyes. Daniel, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't know. You didn't know because you never bothered to look, Daniel said quietly. You sold your daughter without even trying to understand who you were selling her to. You're lucky I'm nothing like my uncle. Grace's father left with his head hanging in shame. 6 months later, Grace was back in school studying to become a nurse. Daniel had inherited all his parents' property and started a foundation to help families in debt. They had fallen deeply in love, for real this time. On their 6-month wedding anniversary, Grace looked at Daniel and said, You know what's funny? What? Everyone thought I was the one who got the bad deal in this marriage. They thought you were crazy and I was the victim. Daniel laughed. And now I know the truth. I'm the luckiest woman in the world. I married the smartest, bravest, most loving man I've ever met. And he chose me. Daniel pulled Grace close. We chose each other, Grace. And that's what makes us both the lucky ones. As they kissed, Grace thought about how sometimes the person everyone calls crazy is actually the only sane one in the crowd. Sometimes the person everyone pities is actually the most blessed. And sometimes, the marriage everyone laughs at becomes the greatest love story ever told. Sometimes life's biggest blessings come disguised as disasters. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who changes everything. And sometimes, being forced into something you don't want leads you exactly where you need to be. Grace thought she was marrying a madman, but she actually married her guardian angel. What looked like the worst day of her life became the first day of her real life. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that sometimes our biggest trials become our greatest triumphs. And remember, never judge someone by what others say about them. The person everyone calls crazy might just be the wisest person in the room.